Welcome everybody to this month's Climate Action Network webinar, a project of Climate Action Santa Monica's CHASM. I'm Nancy Sanchez, one of CHASM's Climate Job Corps. We have a great program lined up for you today with our guest, Regina Pally. And we will explore the role of elders, grandparents in particular, in climate action. But first, just one quick update to CHASM. On February 9, 2024, CHASM will be hosting its third annual Santa Monica King Tide celebration, starting at 7:30 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. If anyone is interested in attending, just let me know, or if you would like to help us by volunteering, I will put the link in the chat for anyone to sign up, in addition to my email.
What's the program doing? What's the event doing?
It will be for the King Tide celebration. So what that is we will be documenting through photographs of the King Tides that will be like seeing the sea coast elevation and the water level and see how it's impacting our environment.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, the photos will be documented and sent to the California Coastal Commission.
There's an educational element to it as well that will be explained by the docents.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Now, Laurene von Klan, the executive director and co-chair of our steering committee, who is going to introduce our speaker.
Okay. Regina Pally is a neighbor of mine and a friend and fellow climate activist. She's retired now from private practice as a psychiatrist and psychoanalyst and is really currently engaged in helping the community. She's the author of The Reflective Parent, How to Do Less and Relate More with Your Kids, which emphasizes that building and maintaining a strong parent-child relationship is the single most important thing a parent can do for their child. She's founder of the Center for Reflective Communities, which provides training and educational workshops designed to help parents and other care providers build strong relationships with children by enhancing their capacity to be reflective. Reflective capacity is the uniquely human ability that enables us to make sense of what's going on inside another person and inside ourselves. Regina maintains that being reflective in our relationships with children leads to greater empathy, understanding, and acceptance, less stress, anger, and aggression, all of which ultimately promote healthier child development. Regina has 3 adult children, 7 grandchildren, and lives with her husband in Santa Monica. She is, as I said, a climate activist, taking action in her own home and in the community through her regular participation with the group Changemakers. And today, I will be interviewing Regina for about 25 minutes, and then I hope we can have discussion between all of us. So, Regina, recently a New York Times article centered on the increasing number of people seeking help with mental health issues related to climate, anxiety, fear, depression. Climate's raised all kinds of new stresses. Should I have children? Am I safe in my home? Do I need to move? Climate-related threats used to feel far away and distant, but with regular wildfires, flooding, bad air, etc., people no longer feel safe. In your opinion as a therapist and psychiatrist, what does this kind of ongoing trauma mean for people seeking to be to have mental health?
It's enough to keep you up at night, isn't it? So, the thing about climate anxiety, in my book, anxiety is anxiety is anxiety. It doesn't matter what you're anxious about. Basically the same techniques work. You have to be. What anxiety does is it revs up your nervous system. And some people distinguish, I guess you could say, between fear, which is the the threat of something imminent, like a tiger is in front of you, a car is just about to hit you, whatever, there's a gun somewhere. Anxiety is considered a threat that's not imminent. Okay. But the problem is our bodies are designed to not know the difference. So our bodies react to real danger in the same way that we react to danger that may not happen. It might be even a danger that is just in our own mind, like, oh, everybody's gonna, laugh at me when I talk. And versus climate anxiety, it's a real danger, but it's happening all around us, but it's not the kind of danger like a car is about to hit you. So, but the thing to keep in mind is the body reacts the same no matter what it is. Now, the dilemma is when your body is reacting, the stress response, we have what goes up must come down. That's the key. For mental health, physical health, social health, everything, we have to have a way of regulating our stress about it, even if it's real. And I'm going to say, one of my gurus, not that I ever met him, was Viktor Frankl, who was in a concentration camp. And his approach, he says, no matter what the situation, we have to find meaning. We have to find a meaning in the situation. So like for climate change, the meaning for me is I have to become part of the community. This is a calling for me to become part of the community. So the two things that have to happen for regulating your nervous system are anything that calms you down. And we could talk about what those things are. So I don't know, is that a response to your question? I hope.
Sure, absolutely. What I'm wondering is if they used to say, if you present at your therapist, you say, well, I'm really anxious, my family's anxious, my kids are anxious about climate, I'm anxious about this, I'm depressed about it. And then the old joke was, well, tell me about your mother.
Oh, right? You mean what a therapist does? Yeah.
Right. When you're at therapy. And is it when you're dealing with something that is out there, and some people are calling it a hoax. Some people are you look around you and it seems like not enough is being done, or you see people, maybe your neighbors, who seem to not care one bit because of the behaviors that they're demonstrating. How does that conflict that all around us influence our ability to feel validated, or even treat our, deal with our own mental health on this issue?
Well, first, let me address the issue of therapists saying, so tell me about your mother. Listen, there's bad therapy and there's good therapy. And as a therapist, I have found, that the key to doing therapy is the first step is listen. The second step is listen. The third step is listen. The fourth step is empathize. And the fifth step is validate. So the concept of when someone is talking about whatever their anxiety is, your goal, the aim is really to address like, well, tell me more about it. And, I can understand how frightened you are. And that makes sense to me that you'd be frightened about that. Now, okay, that's the therapy component. And then another therapy component for me is the issue of dealing with the fact that not everybody agrees with you. And how do you deal with that? I think from the beginning of life all the way to the end of life, we are highly influenced by what other people think. We are a tribal species. So we're highly influenced by what other people think, what their thoughts are, what their beliefs are, what they think about us. And we can't help it. It's going to happen. You have to be prepared for it. It's especially dangerous during the adolescent years, right? When there's this sort of peer pressure to fit in with this adolescent peer group. So I believe, I do some therapy, I do this with kids, whoever, is for people to develop a sense of strength about their own beliefs. And even from a young age, it's interesting. I had just a silly anecdote. Hope I don't step on anybody's toes in saying this, but I'm an atheist. I don't believe in God. Okay. I don't believe morals come from religion. I think morals come from, your personal beliefs and upbringing. But my son, my oldest son, he was 5, and he asked me, do I believe in God? I hemmed and I hawed. I didn't want to, I didn't want to influence him. I wasn't sure how to handle it. And he kept asking, you believe in God? And, he could tell I wasn't giving him a straight answer. And finally I said, no, I don't believe in God. And he said, well, I do. And because I had raised him when asking anything, that whether it be what shoes you want to wear, what TV program, you ask a child what they think. What do you think? If a kid comes and says, Johnny thinks I'm stupid, and you say to the child, well, that wasn't very nice. But then you say, are you stupid? No, I'm not stupid. And you get the child to really start to trust themselves. This is a key thing. I mean, this is like probably the most important thing I do in therapy half the time, but is getting people to trust their own feelings. So like you're a climate activist and everybody around you is, a lot of people laughed at me when I put in rain barrels to collect water from the roof. We have solar panels. I mean, I'm extreme, okay? Solar panels. If the distance is less than a mile, I walk. I ride a bike most of the time instead of driving. I mean, I'm extreme, okay? Not everybody's going to be like me, but people laugh at me sometimes. And I have to counteract my own inner feeling of sometimes feeling silly. I used to arrive with high heels and a dress, with my helmet to work. And, sometimes people would laugh at me about, how I looked on my bicycle. But you have to have an inner conviction of your own beliefs. And I think this is a really important thing. And as a climate activist, you really have to, because, there's just so much crap out there in terms of the ideas people have. And, we have to deal with it. It's just a reality.
So Regina, in your own family, you talked about your son not necessarily, being on the same page with you when he was 5 about God. How do you, I think elders are supposed to be wise, they're
Yes.
supposed to model, they're supposed to have some knowledge.
Mhm.
What is the knowledge that you want to impart to your grandchildren? Are there good ways to do it? And how do you do it without being a burden to them, right? Without,
Yes. Mhm.
yes, say a little bit about that.
Yes. Yes. So in my household, again, I hope this doesn't step on anyone's toes, but we don't always flush the toilet when we pee, right? So my grandkids come to my house, and in the beginning, it was ick, right? Because in their houses, they don't do the same thing. And but that has the ick factor. And I had to go through this thing of, oh, is it bad for my grandkids? And all this stuff. But then eventually, they would say proudly, Grandma, I didn't flush the toilet, But it would always bring up also a conversation, like, why aren't we flushing the toilet? And, I would talk about drought in California. Now, we don't want to frighten kids. And one thing that's really cool about kids is when they ask questions, they only want the answer to the question they've asked. They only want an answer to the question they can handle the answer to, so to speak. So,
So you don't shift the
you don't say, you just
argument.
answer the question there. Why do we have a drought? A lot of factors, and and I explain what I think some of the factors are, including that we have been using too many fossil fuels and it's getting in the air, and I give a scientific explanation. And I mean, maybe I could say it now. There's like about 3 things, very specific things that parents can do, that grandparents, whoever's dealing with their child. Again, I remember I talked about the nervous system. And whatever the issue is, if you can keep your nervous system regulated, you're going to maximize how well you do. You're going to maximize wellness. Now, we can't control wellness totally because there are real crisis factors. But if we can regulate our nervous system, we can prevent ourselves from falling into despair, hopelessness, and severe depression. And so the first thing is relationship. I mean, again, human beings are designed from the very, very beginning of life to seek out relationships. And the primary reason we seek out relationships are to feel safe, to feel connected. This is what we do. Remember, we grew up I grew up in New York, and there would be blizzards, and neighbors you never even talked to before, come out, and they're friendly and they're nice. We have the same thing. I felt a little bit with when we had the earthquakes, or when we have the pandemic. People come together, people who don't even necessarily know each other, because we're designed to want to feel safer in connection. And this is what children need. The primary thing you can do is, I'm in this with you. For young children, you say things like, I'm doing everything possible to take care of the situation. You can always talk to me about it. Anything that gives the child the feeling that you're connected to them. And remember, children don't really, especially young ones, they don't really fully understand all the dangers. What you might say about climate change might sound terrifying to you, but it may not sound as terrifying to the child. And the child is hoping that you will keep the situation safe. So that's one thing. And the other thing about keeping the nervous system regulated is to be able to take action. There's something about the thing that is so abhorrent to us often is the helplessness of the situation. And our minds are designed to look for something concrete we can do. And so that's why it's great to give kids something they can do, like not flush the toilet or walk. My family, we are walkers. The kids have to walk. They want to drive. Oh, drive. But here, when they're in Los Angeles, they might drive when they're with their parents in New York, but when they're here, we drive. You want bagels? All right, we're gonna walk down to the bagel store. And so these are things kids can do. To me, that's closest connection and giving people a feeling of that they can take action.
So you said social connection, taking action, feelings of safety. What about when we as older people, and a lot of us in the room are older, might actually be vulnerable in the current situation? So there's bad air, right? You hear on the news, older people are uh, should stay inside, or during the pandemic, there was a lot of fear about losing grandma or grandpa. How would you help comfort a child who might actually be scared for us, scared of losing their
It's a
elder?
wonderful question. I, I used to be afraid of talking about death. I thought, I mean, I had some of my own experiences as a child that left me very worried about any kinds of feelings of um, dying and not being healthy. And so I came to parenting very frightened. I don't know if any of you recall the Babar books, but that was
Oh,
like one of my
yes.
favorite books when I mean, now it's kind of not considered, PC, but when I was a kid, it was one of my favorite books. And when my kids were little, it was one of their favorite books. Okay. So there's the part where Babar's mother is killed and she dies. And I got to that part, and my mother was sitting in the room with me at the time. And I looked at my mother and I said, what do I do? And I said to my kids said, what? His mother died? And I said, yeah, but turns out later on she got up and she was alive. I mean, I lied. I couldn't handle death. And then they got old enough that they could read and they could figure it out themselves. And then I said to them, I mean, this is, me being silly, but I said to them, oh yeah, I went to the librarian. There's a librarian here in the audience. I went to the librarian and I found out that the mother had really died because I was kind of, getting ready to talk to them. So the fact about death and vulnerability in old people is a reality. And if we don't respond in a calm, caring way about it, the kids, it all goes underground. I mean, it's not like if you never talk about death or your vulnerability with a kid that they stop being anxious about it. It just goes underground. And if fear goes underground, it can't be dealt with and it festers and it gets worse. So dealing with it front and center, grandma, are you more susceptible to getting sick because of the air pollution? Yeah, I am. Does that mean you're going to die? Well, someday I will die. Oh, grandma, don't die. Well, I don't want to die either, but it's going to happen. But your parents, then you say things like, when kids are talking about you dying, they're really talking about me. Am I safe? I mean, yes, they don't want to lose you and all that. But most of the time, especially young kids, they're just trying to find out, am I safe? And so you can say things to them like, yeah, I'm gonna die. It's gonna be sad. Yeah, I'll feel sad. I'll miss you. You'll miss me, whatever. Your parents will be there and they'll be taking care of you. And I think, and then what's so interesting about kids is they're in the midst of all this worry about it. And then 2 seconds later, they're off and they're playing and they're not affected by it anymore. And it's just going to be better if you do it in that kind of more empathic, connected way and about the reality that it's sad. We want to teach kids, I mean, the most important thing in life is to be resilient. And you're never resilient by avoiding fear. You're more resilient if you can face fear and talk about it. And so, that's my sense of it.
So, I know you asked your family this, but and you wanted to know their answer, but are grandparents or elders important in a unique way? I think of my own mother who, when her grandkids would come to visit, it was like they walked into fantasy land, and she had the advantage of not having to parent them, right?
Yes.
So what is the importance? What are the unique assets of potentially, not all grandparents and not all families, but what are potentially the unique aspects of a grandparent? that could be brought to bear.
I think I said this too at, another time. That's what menopause is for.
What is it? What is menopause for? I need an answer.
Human menopause is for, yeah, I know, with all the hot flashes and all this stuff. The menopause is nature's way of making sure that there's a period of our life where we're not reproducing, so that we can be around to help take care of the community's offspring, right? So that's my view of it. I mean, I'm making that up, but I know, Nancy, you're studying. Tell me you're studying anthropology. Did you tell me you were studying anthropology?
Yes, I study
Yeah.
anthropology.
Well, I think this comes from an anthropological view, that I got, that evolutionary anthropology. But so we could say it's a biologic thing for the cohesiveness of the community to have the grandparents be around, so they're no longer reproducing and having to take care of young ones, and they're around, because remember, women have always been working. It's very recent that there was a period of time when women weren't working. They were always working in the home. They were always, handing the children off to other kids, older kids, grandparents. So I think grandparents have that, being a support as a major thing, along with, so I'll tell you what my kids said. Grandparents are there because they know the history of the family. So that's an important thing. Again, we know that human beings, unlike other animals, are able to retain history. And therefore, they can remember things that happened previously, and it's a learning device, right? That's why whether you want to say it's progress or not, we've had a lot of progress because we can remember, how things were before.
I think that's an interesting, that memory is interesting to me because of the stories. I mean, the stories that were told in my family about migration, very difficult migration sometimes, or
Yes,
surviving illness, or
yes,
inventiveness and creativity.
yeah.
People say, we never thought we would survive when they dropped that first atom bomb. We thought it was the end of the world, and it wasn't.
And
Can
also, just when it
tell
comes to
those
stories, when
Yeah.
it comes to stories, children love stories. It's shocking to me, the degree to which children love stories. Do you want me to tell you the story about when Daddy was a little boy and he had the same problem? Would you like me to tell you the story about when Grandma, was a little girl and she got sick, just like, it doesn't matter. I mean, what the situation is. Children are drawn to stories, even as adults we're drawn to it, but kids in particular. And kids, what's interesting about kids is they don't really know the difference between fantasy and reality as well as we do. And so they're drawn to stories. It's a great learning device. So grandparents are filled with stories, and just about life, and you tell it like it's a story, and kids are going to be so the history of the family. And in my family, what I discovered, initially I was so interested in making sure everybody felt like an individual, and got everybody their freedom to think the way they wanted to think and all this stuff. Somewhere along the line, I realized sometimes it's too chaotic. Like when you're deciding what restaurant to go eat at, you can't give everybody the freedom to have their own opinion. Sometimes you just have to say, this is where we're going. And I learned that as a parent, that sometimes, so I started doing that more. And so that's kind of, I think, one of the things that grandparents can do. This is the tradition. This is how we do it. And children love that. Why? One thing that tradition makes us feel is we are connected to something bigger than ourselves. we're human beings, we're always in this tension between individuality and connection, individuality and connection. So you have to have both, I think, to be a well-balanced human being. And tradition gives us a sense of belonging and connection and meaning. So that's what I do. I have tradition. Like, for example, I know this again sounds silly, but on Christmas, I'm Jewish. Okay, so I'm Jewish. On Christmas, Jewish people eat Chinese food. I mean, I can't, I know it sounds silly to say in this group here, but that's what I grew up with. And you go out to a Chinese restaurant and you eat Chinese food. So we have this great Chinese restaurant that we like, and we've always been going there, but it has gotten so crowded and so popular, it's impossible to go there. So then we started ordering from it. But even their ordering is like, they're so busy, it's ridiculous. So this Christmas, my kids were saying, Mom, let's just go to a different place, or let's order from a different place. And at first I got very influenced. Oh, I don't want to upset my kids. And, okay, I'll go along with that. Then I thought, no, this is what I want. This is our family tradition. I don't care how difficult it is. This is what we're doing. And I said that. And I was literally on the phone calling in the order, and they're arguing with me. Mom, it's not worth it. We don't want to have to go pick up. I mean, and I just went, I'm talking to them, but I had to gather my self-confidence to do that. And so anyhow, that to me was being the grandmother.
Those are some very, very wonderful tips. And we covered quite a range of things today. From menopause, who knew, to
Chinese food.
Chinese food at Christmas. Yeah, but let's open it up for discussion now. I think we have we have some young people, we have some elders who aren't grandparents.
Oh, can I just say one more thing?
Yes, yes.
One
Please
more
say
thing.
one more thing, and then what I'd like you to do is raise hands. You can do that physically, or you can do that with through your Zoom at the bottom of your bar. It's you have an option to raise hand. So let's have the discussion. Regina,
One more
don't
thing.
forget what you were going to say. Yes.
When you become a grandparent, so like my mother had a lot of issues and problems. So had some difficulties. But one thing somehow she got as a grandparent, she would always tell me what a wonderful mother I was. And that was such a powerful thing. My mother thought I was a wonderful mother. And I realized that's what mothers need. That is really what young mothers need. And anyhow, so that's my last comment about becoming a grandparent, is to tell your children what good parents they are.
Thank you. And maybe what good climate activists they are, if you're lucky. So does anyone have a question for Regina, or an observation that they would like to make for the group about being a grandparent or an elder in the community during the era of climate? I think Susan has her hand up. Yes, Susan.
It's what I mentioned before, I think, Regina. I am caught in the conflict of other grandparents who show their love by giving stuff, lots of stuff.
I know.
My car on the way north to see my grandkids at Christmas was full of stuff from other people. And I feel a conflict between wanting to show how much I love them that way and knowing that in my own life, I'm trying so hard to find meaning in ways which don't involve material stuff.
I know. I'm a minimalist myself, but I completely agree with you. I hate the stuff. I have 3 kids, everybody's different. So I have one son, his family is full of stuff, and that grandparent is like, she just gives them whatever they want. They just say to me, how come Grammy gives us anything we want and you don't?
Yeah.
And I tell them, what's just so interesting, I don't believe in all that stuff, but you have to start every conversation like this with, everyone's different. And all I can do is tell you how I am. And then the hope is they internalize what you think more than the other parent.
I
But
remember,
so, yeah.
Regina.
So that's how
when
I deal with it. And listen, some stuff is okay, but too much stuff isn't good. And everybody's different. I don't believe in too much stuff.
Me neither.
So once, Regina, you were telling me about a conversation you had had with your daughter, and you were regretting having, I think, given advice or like some recommendations that using your reflective parenting, you felt, oh my gosh, I did not mean to put a burden on her. I didn't
Oh.
want my advice to make, and I feel like in the climate space, this is what they say actually turns a lot of people away from climate activism is when people give them advice,
Yeah.
that becomes a burden. Any reflections on that as a therapist and
The only
grandmother
thing I
who
can-
wants to
yes.
tell them, don't give so many gifts, it's bad for the
Yes. Well, two things. I guess, maybe I'm wired differently than other people, but I have a deep sense of virtue. So for me, there's a selfishness in a way. I feel better about myself in doing it, in being a climate activist than I would if I wasn't. But in burdening my children, I mean, what can I say? If you are too much of a Scrooge around your kids, it's not healthy for your relationship with them. And so even the Buddha, who was into, self-denial and all this stuff, even the Buddha talked about you can't go to the extreme. You have to find a middle ground. And I think that's what, relationships require, is that we have to kind of meet people halfway if we can. If we're too Scrooge-like, too scolding, too moralistic, first of all, people don't take it in. Second of all, it's not good for the relationship. So I always put the relationship front and center. And when my kids are telling me about all these big, amazing things, particularly this one son, all the big, amazing things are getting their kids. Oh, that's wonderful. And frankly, when I'm buying I buy those kids more expensive gifts because not only my son, but his wife really expects it, because she was raised by this mother who, gave her everything. So we can't be too moralistic and judgmental.
Thank you. Let's hear from some youth here. Jasmine.
Hi. I actually wanted to add to the conversation of gift
Yes.
giving because my sister has two sons, like two kids, and I struggle with finding them gifts because they kind of get everything that they want. Like they have so many toys around, and like sometimes I see like last Christmas they open stuff and then like 2 minutes later they'd be distracted by something else, and it just keep happening. And I'm like, well, I'm happy that they're happy and they're having their moment. But I found that like for myself, I was like, well, what can I give them when they are getting everything that they want? And I found that I find a lot of like fulfillment in like making stuff or like cooking or baking for them, or also like some of my favorite gifts have been like experiences that like adults have given me.
Yeah.
So I think those are also like really good alternatives if you don't want to give like a thing.
Yes, that's a great idea. Like this Christmas, I gave a cookbook.
Yeah.
And then I said, well, you can pick any recipe and then we'll make it. So,
Yeah.
But yes,
that.
that's a good, wonderful, wonderful idea. Experiences, art projects.
Exactly. Yeah.
Things from the family too. I mean, I have a little box in my, that, this used to belong to you know,
That's very sweet.
grandma, you know. Okay, I think Margaret had her hand up next.
Yes, I was just going to suggest exactly what Laurene suggested, is that I have found now starting to give my grandchildren selected little things that belong to me, or, you know, an old book that belonged to my husband, and these are treasured, and it goes along with the stories, so that you can still be generous, but I think you can be generous in a creative way if you're lucky enough to have saved stuff. And I guess I'm one of
Wonderful,
those people
yeah.
that have saved a lot of stuff. So there's a lot of the Babar books. They are the favorite books of the grandchildren. They just love.
Wonderful, good.
No, it is a testament to the fact that stories can have disturbing or unpleasant or frightful, there can be frightening elements to stories, but I think the power of Babar is that there's always a kind of resolution. There is a kind of resilience that's built in, which I think is wonderful. But my question for you, Regina, is really asking about how the response, the grandparental response changes as children, you know, as they get
Oh,
older.
yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for that one.
So I think that, you know, a 5 or 6 year old, or even my 2 grandchildren at their age, you know, the parents bought a electric vehicle, you know, they know about recycling. All of these virtues are being reinforced. I think in most schools now, that's very much a part of the curriculum. But when a child gets a little older, you know, they're exposed to more information, and they might, you know, they might see sort of beyond the everyday things that can be done, and how one addresses that. I should also say that when I visited my grandson's class last May, it was the very end of the school year, it was a first grade class, and there were projects on the wall of how children, what they cared about in the world. And there were so many responses that had to do with the climate,
Yeah.
Really?
the environment. I mean, even at that age, it was so interesting. So there's already that sort of buzz of not only awareness, but I'm sure anxiety. And I think that, you know, that as they age, as they become older, how one's response, you know, might change.
Well, you know, it's a great question, because as kids get older, the realities of the terrors, like wildfires, like what happened in Maui, you know, the floods that happened in San Diego, deaths. I mean, these things are realities that older kids, you know, really know about and are terrifying. And of course, how you deal with it is different, but so, you know, the older the kids are, there's a couple of things that I think of is, again, you have to validate their experience. Yeah, that is really scary. And because they're not going to buy into anything you say unless because if you just poo-poo it, I mean, I'm sure you never do that, Margaret, but you know, that anybody who would poo-poo somebody's anxiety is going to lose that person. You know, you shut down. You poo-pooed my anxiety. I'm not listening to you. So you have to take it seriously. Yes, it is frightening. You label it. You know, and then you ask the kid, "What are you specifically afraid of?" You know, like, do you have your own? What's your fear? Because you can't assume you know. Like, is our house going to burn down? Might be their fear, right? Are we going to drown? You know, and then you have to answer what their personal fear is, and we still have to hold out hope. I mean, the whole point of all of this is, if people fall into a state of helplessness and despair, it's no good for anybody. So that's what we're, you know, want to make sure that, but the other thing is, I have to, you know, be realistic about it. everyone has a different temperament. Some people are more optimistic and hopeful just by dint of personality. We're all born with a temperament, a personality, inborn traits of how well we're going to cope or not. And some kids will get like really anxious, you know. I mean, some kids will become so frightened, and it will be very hard to reassure them or help them recover. And on the extremes, you know, we all know about kids who are like hypersensitive to things, and you know, other people are more resilient, and some people are in denial. I mean, it's a coping trait, but it's not really terribly helpful. But so yeah, I think as kids get older, you have to be more realistic. But I do believe in the value of offering them something they can do. We're trying to help them think through what they can do. It's a good coping mechanism. I don't know, Margaret, is that? Do you
Thank
have
you.
anything else you wanted to ask me about that?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh,
Well, we have Kent with his hand up and Izumi.
Hi,
Kent?
Regina. This is great. You've really given us some great insights into this topic. Well, like I said earlier, I'm not a parent, much less a grandparent, but I do find myself interacting with young people who could be, grandchildren. They're of that age. And I've come into situations where I'm a little perplexed on how to handle them. Um, I'm thinking in particular of my role working with the Climate Corps. And Climate Corps is the youth group that is out in the community advocating and doing projects, promoting climate solutions and stuff like that. And in one particular situation, a team of young people was given a project, and I was asked to be an advisor or mentor on it. And my dilemma was I was struggling with finding that line between showing and teaching and structuring what the project was about versus letting them take the lead and discover ideas and solutions and, following up on their own to instill that self-confidence that you talked about. And yeah, and which, I think is really the goal of these teaching situations, to give them the skills to be able to do that going forward. Not that this was just a token project. It had real value and is continuing to have value, actually. But the problem was they weren't very motivated, and
even though they were like volunteering or they were in this situation, they weren't motivated.
They were clearly interested. They were clearly participating because they thought climate was important and something they wanted to have a constructive role in solving. But I don't know if it's because they were just busy with their other lives, life activities or what, but it was really tricky getting them going. And so I struggled with how much.
How did that manifest? Could you give me an example how it manifested?
Okay, so the
Jasmine
project
looks like she knows what this is about. Jasmine, you look like you're very connected to this to this question.
Oh,
do you want to say anything, Jasmine?
in a little bit, I would love to.
Okay, go ahead, Ken. Yeah.
Oh,
so
okay.
give me an example. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this particular project was about finding mobility solutions to commuting to school and how to promote alternatives. And they had done some research and had some ideas, but they just weren't taking form. And, as it got later in the project, I eventually said, well, listen, why don't we create a map that shows, some of the resources that are available, the bus routes, the bike routes, the entrance points and stuff like that. And they got behind that. They did. I wound up doing a bunch of the work myself, and it wasn't the way I would have liked it to have played out. And
Kent, I will tell you, you are not alone.
Mhm.
This is like a real problem lately. It goes all the way through into college. That children, it's sad to say, but children have been so spoon-fed about how to do things. Parents have been so worried, is my kid going to get into a good college? That they have jumped in. And some people call it helicopter parenting, some people call it snowplow parenting. They have taken away all the impediments to achievement, but to the point where kids no longer have their own inner motivation to do well, let alone the belief that they have something to offer, so it's a kind of an endemic cultural problem.
Hmm.
This is something even in college you hear that the deans of different colleges talk about this. And so how do you respond to that? The only thing I could suggest adding to anything that I can feel your frustration with the situation, is to present it to them. Kind of I see that you're interested, you're here, but I'm getting the feeling that there's something getting in the way of you guys moving forward with this. Can you help me figure out what that is? Because I could tell you what to do. I could do it myself, but and you wouldn't really have the experience of learning it and actually just confronting that issue directly through noticing it and asking what they think about it.
Mm-hmm. Well, at this point, I'd like to hear Jasmine's response.
Yeah. Because Jasmine's on the younger side.
And that reminded me of growing up. One of my favorite memories was like walking to school with my grandparent. I don't know. I think also not everyone has that ability. For me, like my school was like a block away, but it was my favorite thing. I would wait for them, and they would also like pick me up and take me. And I think that might be something a lot of people don't experience now. So
yes, yeah, yeah.
Wonderful to connect along the way. Yes. Thank you. Izumi.
I know we're probably running out of time, but it's not so much of a question. Maybe it is. Like I said, my grandkids moved to Texas, so we don't get to see them. And they have 3 sets of grandparents, right? And I am the only one that's not blood related. So it's more about the relationship with the other grandparents, and the parents, right? My stepdaughter is fairly conscious, but still there's a lot of things that in my book, she's not recycling, and, she's conscious about what she buys, but she's not recycling. She's driving a big SUV, blah, blah, blah. So I just have to be really sensitive about what I say to them. and like and like the gift giving
And I have
too.
to say to you, that has nothing to do with being a stepmother.
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
it would not, even if you were the mother.
Yeah,
That'd be
it's
worse
true.
if you were the mother.
It's true. It's true. And it's like, giving like the Christmas time and birthday times, like I know that I see what the other grandparents are giving to them, and they have so much stuff. Like, oh my God, these 2 girls have like a couple dozens dolls, and I mean it's almost, I'm like, I don't want to participate in that, material giving, so I mean, I don't know what to ask, but I'm just saying it's hard to navigate the relationships with the parents of the grandchildren and the other grandparents.
I know it's very hard not to be judgmental. It's just so hard. We all struggle with that. You know, I used to tell parents, you have to have a bloody tongue because you should be biting it all the time, you know, not saying things. And it's a gift, really. I mean, in a way, to try to not be judgmental. It's a gift you're giving to them, even though it's very hard. Yeah, no, I don't have a solution to it other than, you know, you complain to your friends, but not to your kids or stepkids.
Well, thank you for that observation, Izumi. I think everybody's in a blended family, or a chosen family of some level these days, so.
Gabriella had a question though, too, so I don't want to
Oh,
leave her.
Gabriella, thank you. I must have missed it. Please, what's your question, Gabriella?
It's more like I hope you guys don't forget, like, yes, we are younger than you guys, but I think you guys are forgetting your essence as grandparents and the wiser generation, you know? Kids today, they get a lot of stuff because I think most of us are trying to compensate that we're never there. So just keep that in mind, like kids just want basic needs, which is attention and to know that they're being seen. And like even, you know, Jasmine's best memory is like my grandparents accompanied me, you know?
Right.
So it's going back to the basics, stop competing with all these people. I know kids that have better iPhones than me. And I'm like, you know, I'm enamored. So how does that work? It's just on them. Like, just remember your role as who you are as grandparents and not to deviate from that and try to compete with the absence of their parents themselves, you know? It's a new generation. And I think sometimes if you play that role, we're gonna keep forgetting what a grandparent really means and represents to the future generations. And that's a very important stand to take, whether you're loved or hated. You have to take that stand for the other generations, not to forget the importance of aging and aging gracefully, you know? So that was my take on it.
Nice, nice.
That's a wonderful reminder to be the elder you are. And I love what you said about seeing young people. And I just want to mention that several people are here involved. Well, I know we're all involved in the community in different ways, but we do have a youth summer program, as well as we have started a year-long youth jobs program where we have young people working with Climate Action Santa Monica, including Jasmine and Nancy. And if any of you feel like you'd like to be someone who just is there to see the work of some of our young climate activists, it might make a big difference to them just to say that their climate action, to know that their climate action has been noticed. And whether or not you do much else. And also, if anyone wants to get even more involved, we would love that. So with that in mind, I want to thank you all for this great discussion, input, observations, questions, and thank Regina Pally for being our honored speaker and sharing her advice and wisdom, and Nancy Sanchez for helping to coordinate the event today. So thank you, everyone. And with that, we will wrap up the meeting. And please get in touch with us if you have any further observations.
And thank you all for listening to me. I mean, you know, nice to share.
Thank you.
Thank
Great
you.
Thank
discussion.
you.
Thank
And
you.
we see you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. We see you. We see you too, Susan. Yeah. Okay. Bye-bye.